You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified love coach. If you haven't lately, go to the calendar, wedeepen.com, and check out all types of upcoming social and transformational experiences that can help you have a more meaningful, loving relationship. Also, because We Deepen has a whole group of growth-minded people. And we understand that sometimes there's people out there with these deep missions in the world and who are busy. And we can help you focus on your love life. If you're interested in private matchmaking or relationship coaching, check out the link at wedeepen.com. Fill out the form to enter into our matchmaking database. Our mission is to inspire more meaningful, loving relationships. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do subscribe, like, follow. It helps more people find it and helps me to continue to host it. Today's episode is a really special one. I have I'll say hero. It's, when people often ask you that question of if you could curate a dinner party, who would the people be at the dinner party? Daryl Davis is number one on the list because my dinner party is sort of controversial. I'm constantly thinking about how to resolve conflict and to bring human beings together so we can work as a collective and we can all be on the same team, eradicate this idea of competition and be together. Also, there's so much hate in the world. And I found myself a couple of weeks ago Googling, why does hate feel like it's so much powerful than love? For example, two people tend to bond, like a group can come together to bond over the idea of hating another human or another group, more so than I believe that they come together to love another being. And I'm so curious of what would transcend that? How could we potentially have more harmonious relationships? And I can't remember the time. I heard of Daryl Davis years ago, and his story just stuck with me because I was like, wow. Okay, so Daryl Davis is a Black man. If you're listening to it, you're not seeing his. We're actually recording the video, so hopefully you can see it later. And he has befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan and helped convert over 200 of them to disaffiliate outside the organization. And we're going to get to hear that story. I'm going to get to pick his brain. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Daryl, for being here and joining me for this conversation today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Christine.
So you've done 4 TED Talks. Wow. I think I've never seen somebody do as many. Esther Perel is one who I watched her TED Talks or 2 TED Talks over and over again. And you have 4 of them. You've also written a book about your story, clan destined relationships. And I guess take me back as I was reading and preparing for this conversation, I realized that it started in childhood for you, which is where a lot of trauma begins, in childhood.
Indeed. Indeed it did. Well, I'm age 64. I'm from Chicago, Illinois originally, and my parents are from the state of Virginia. My dad was U.S. Foreign Service, so State Department. So I grew up as an American Embassy kid during the formative years of my life. My mom, my dad, and I began traveling abroad at the age of 3 in 1961. And how it works is you are assigned to a country with the American Embassy for 2 years. And upon completion of that assignment, you return back home here to the States, and you're here for a few months or a year if you request it or whatever. And then you're sent back overseas to another country for 2 years. So back and forth I went. I lived in Africa. I lived in Europe. I visited many countries in between. And when I was overseas, my first exposure to school was overseas at the age of 3, right? I did kindergarten, I did first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all overseas. In between, I was back home here. My classmates in class overseas were from all around the world, from Nigeria, Japan, Russia, Germany, Italy, France, Sweden, you name it. If any of those countries had an embassy where we were, all of their kids went to the same school. So that was my baseline for what school was to be. And then when I would come home back here to my own country, the US, I would either be in all Black schools or Black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. Even though the Supreme Court passed desegregation in 1954, which is 4 years before I was born, schools did not integrate overnight. It took years and years. And in fact, in some places, even today, people still having trouble with getting schools integrated, that much longer. Well, anyway, one time when I came back, I was age 10 in 1968. And we were living in Massachusetts for the time. And I was one of two Black kids in the entire school in the fourth grade. There was a little Black girl in second grade and myself in fourth grade. So I really, didn't see a whole lot of her. A, she was a second grader. And B, all of my friends were like fourth and fifth graders. And they all were white. I was only, Black kid, Black boy in the school, at the time. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of my class, and I'll let you see if you can find me.
Oh, right there in the middle, the only Black boy in the entire class. Yes.
Exactly. And those guys that you see along the back row with me, those are my friends. And several of them were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So I joined the Cub Scouts in 1968. I was the only Black Scout in the area, and we had a parade along with other organizations, the Brownies, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, 4-H Club, you name it. And I was the only Black participant in this parade. And as we were marching down the streets, the sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people who were waving and cheering and having a good time until we got to a certain point along the parade route when suddenly I was being pelted with soda pop cans and bottles and small pebbles and debris from the street by just a small group of spectators who were standing on the sidewalk off to my right, mixed in with a larger crowd. It wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. I would say maybe 4 or 5 people throwing things. I remember there being a couple of kids, maybe a year or two older than me. I didn't know them. And a couple of adults. I assume maybe their parents. But I had no idea what was happening. And when I got hit, of course, I looked over to my right to see, where these projectiles were coming from. And I saw that group of people. And I just, to show you how naive I was, my first inclination was, oh, those people over there to my right, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. I didn't realize that I was the only Scout being targeted until my dead mother, my Cub master, my troop leader, all came running back and huddled over me with their bodies. These are white people, adults, and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept asking them, I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And all they would do is just, tell me to keep moving, everything's going to be okay. They never answered my question. But I saw no other Scouts getting this protection. So now I'm left to think that I had done something to these people to cause them to target me. I had no idea. And by the end of the parade, I still had no idea because they never answered my question when I would ask them, why is this happening? Well, it's okay now. So when I got home, my mother and father, who were not in attendance, they were cleaning me up and putting Band-Aids on me and questioning me as to how I tripped and fell down and got all scraped up. And I explained to them that was not the case. I didn't trip and fall down. Somebody threw things at me. So for the first time in my life, at the age of 10, my parents sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, I know you might find this hard to believe, Christina, but at the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. And that's why it's so important for me to give you my background. Because, like I said, my first exposure to school was a multicultural environment, which we did not have in this country. And we all got along people from different countries who may not look like me. Maybe they don't even speak my language. Maybe, they don't worship as I do. But we worked together, we played together, we had slumber parties together. That was my norm, And so there was no racism. That did not exist in my sphere overseas. So when my parents were telling me this, my 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that somebody who knew nothing about me, had never even seen me before, let alone spoken to me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. And my parents were telling me this is true. I did not believe them because my friends at that school that you saw in my fourth grade picture, they looked just like the people who were throwing things. They were the same color. Color has nothing to do with this. And my little friends overseas, whether they were my fellow Americans at the embassy or my little French friends or my Danish or German, or Swedish friends, they didn't behave that way. So my parents were wrong. It has nothing to do with the color of my skin. I didn't even understand why they would even suggest that. All right. Well, very quickly, as you may already know, but you're a lot younger than I am, 1968 was a very turbulent year in this country in terms of civil rights and the assassination of Dr. King and all that. So I quickly learned that what they were telling me about this phenomenon that I'd never heard of before called racism actually existed. So now at that point, at age 10, I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've made it my mission for the last 41 years to find the answer to that question. So that's where the journey started.
So fascinating. So before that moment, at 10 years old, as you're playing with many other children, many different races and backgrounds, ethnicities, and those children are playing with you, there was never you never felt any type of difference up until that moment.
No, I never did. And following that experience, I had some other experiences with it, after I realized this thing does exist. So yeah, I had plenty of experiences, but that was my first.
Wow. Okay. So now fast forward. So you have this question implanted in your brain at 10 years old. Where does that question take you?
Okay. Well, that fall, we went back overseas, returning to what I call normalcy, where everybody gets along, right? And so, that experience was it was never forgotten, but put on the back burner. But every time I come back home after my parents' assignment, I'd run into some kind of incident, that involved the color of my skin. And I began buying a lot of books, anything I could find on Black supremacy, on white supremacy, on anti-Semitism, on racism, on the Ku Klux Klan, on the Nazis over in Germany, on the neo-Nazis over here in the U.S. Because I wanted to learn, where does that ideology come from? Where is it going? How can it be addressed? Now, my books all talked about it, but they didn't answer those questions. They didn't answer the questions, that I had that had been plaguing me since the age of 10. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? So let's fast forward. I graduate high school. I go to college. I graduate college with my degree in music. I'm a professional musician. I make my living touring around this country and around the world. Now, I'll say this. I have performed in all 50 states. And when you combine my childhood travels with my parents in the Foreign Service, now combine that with my adulthood travels as a professional musician playing in various countries around the world, I have now been in a total of 61 countries on 6 continents. And what that means is I have been exposed to a multitude, if you will, of skin colors, ethnicities, religions, cultures, ideologies. All of that has helped shape who I've become. And the one thing that I have learned in my travels is that no matter how far I go from our own country, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, I always conclude one thing. No matter how different the people may be who I encounter, we all are human beings. And as such, everyone wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to be treated fairly. Everyone wants the same thing for their family as we want for ours. And everyone wants to be heard. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a society or environment in which we are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I will guarantee that the navigation of that situation or that society or that environment will be much more positive and much more smooth. So lo and behold, music became my profession, but studying race relations became my obsession. So now I've graduated from college and I'm playing full time as a musician. There came a point where I joined a country music band. Country music had made a return. You're down there in Austin, Texas. There was a very famous movie that spurred the country music revival that was filmed in Texas, called at a bar called Gilley's, which was owned by the great country star who passed away last year, Mickey Gilley. The movie was called Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. And they had this mechanical bull and all these country line dances and stuff. It caught on like fire. So all of the bars and clubs, where you played top 40 or whatever else was going on at the time, they switched their music format to country. So I joined the country band. I was the only black guy in the band, and usually the only black guy ever we played. So we played a place in a town called Frederick, Maryland, which is about an hour and 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. Now, the band was, I live in Maryland right now. The band was well established here in Maryland. And I joined them. They had played at this place, Silver Dollar Lounge, before. I'd never been there. I knew about it, though. The Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation of being an all-white lounge. Now, there were no signs, posted that said, no black people, whites only, nothing like that. You've seen those kinds of signs in your history books of, colored drinking fountain and, white patrons only and all that kind of stuff. Nothing like that. It just had that reputation. And, if you go somewhere where you are not welcome and alcohol is being served, sometimes it's not a good combination. So here I am in the Silver Dollar Lounge. And I played the first set with the band, and then we took a break. And I'm following them over to the band table when I felt somebody from behind come up and put their arm around my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in here other than the band, right? And I turn around to see who's touching me. And it was just this white gentleman. And he was considerably older than me. I would say between 15, 18, maybe 19, 20 years older than me. And he says, "Man, I sure love your all's music." I said, "Thank you." And I shook his hand. And he pointed at the stage and said, "I've seen this here band before, but I had never seen you before. Where'd you come from?" And I explained, well, yeah, he probably did see them because they had told me that they had played here before. But this is my first time here. I just joined the band a couple months ago. And he says, "Man, I sure love your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Well, Jerry Lee Lewis, of course, is the great white rock and roll piano player. He was there at the heyday of rock and roll, along with Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Fats Domino, all those pioneering rock and roll people. And I was not offended by what he said, that this was the first time he ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. I was rather surprised that given the fact that he was that much older than me, he did not know the black origin of that kind of music. It'd be like somebody saying, I never heard a black person play the blues. I've only heard, Eric Clapton or somebody. Where do you think the blues came from, right? Uh-huh. So, I said to him, I said, "Well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis got it from?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Jerry Lee got it from the same place that I did, from black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where, that rock and roll, rockabilly style of piano came from." "Oh, no. I never heard no black man play like that except for you." I said, "Look, man," I said, "Jerry Lee Lewis is a very good friend of mine. He's told me himself, the people he would go and see play that kind of music as a kid." Well, he didn't believe that I knew Jerry Lee either. But he was so fascinated with me that he wanted me to come back to his tables and let him buy me a drink. So I don't drink alcohol. I never did. but I let him buy me a cranberry juice. And so he took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And then he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. Well, now I'm like totally baffled. Like, how can that be? Because at that point in my life, I had sat down literally with thousands, even tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. How is it that this guy, at least a decade and a half older than me, had never sat down with a black guy? And so innocently, I asked him, I wasn't trying to be facetious. I was curious. I said, why? And he didn't answer me. He stared down at the tabletop. I asked him again. His buddy sitting next to him elbowed him and said, tell him. I said, tell me. But now I'm mystified, right? And he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing at him, literally, because I know a lot about the Klan. Like I just got done telling you, I began buying all these books on the KKK and everybody else, right? So I knew about the Klan. I had a great depth of knowledge about them. And I know they don't just come up and put their arm around a black guy's shoulder and praise their talent and want to hang out with them and buy them a drink. It doesn't work that way. So, this guy is pulling my leg. So I'm laughing, going along with the joke. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, flips through it, and handed me his Klan membership card. I took a look at this thing. Instantly, I recognized the Ku Klux Klan logo or insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross in the middle and a red blood drop in the center of that cross. I stopped laughing. This thing was for real. So it wasn't funny anymore. I gave it back to him. But we talked about the Klan and some other things. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to come back to the Silver Dollar Lounge with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see, as he put it, the black guy who plays piano like Jerry Lee. I'm not sure that he called me the black guy to his friends, but whatever, that's what he wanted to do. So I would call him every 6 weeks, when we were booked back at that club. And I call him on a Wednesday or Thursday and say, hey, man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar this weekend. Come on out. He'd come out both nights, Friday and Saturday. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. And they'd come, they didn't come in robes and hoods. They came in regular, street clothes. And they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play piano with the band. They'd get out on the dance floor and dance to our music. And then on the breaks, I'd make my way over to his table to thank him for coming, say hello. Some of the Klan people were curious about me. They hung there at the table and wanted to meet me and talk to me. A couple of them, though, every time I started walking in that direction, they'd get up and leave their seat and walk across the room to the other side. So the message implied was, we don't want to shake your hand. We don't want to touch you. We don't even want to talk to you. We're just here to look at you. So, that was fine by me. And so, that went on until the end of that year, at which time I quit that band. And I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else, R&B and whatever else was going on. So I lost track of the guy because, I really had no reason, to stay in contact with the Klan, right? I would only see him, when I was working up there. It wasn't like I had a day off and I'd go hang out with the Klan. I do that today, but I wasn't doing it back then. So a few years later, it just dawned on me out of the blue. Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap. Because see, everybody that I said, my books never addressed it. The people that I would ask, how can this be? They would just say, oh, Daryl, some people are just like that. That's just the way it is. Well, that's not a reason, an answer for me. I need to get inside. So why I said it fell right into my lap is because who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them and hating people who don't believe as they believe, even if they look like them. So my idea was get back in contact with that Klan guy and get him to fix you up with the Klan leader for the state of Maryland. Interview him, and then travel around the country interviewing various Klan leaders from different groups and members, and write a book about it. Because no book had been written about the Ku Klux Klan by a Black author until mine. from the perspective of sitting down face to face with them. Usually when Black people came face to face with the Klan, it wasn't a good thing. All right. They ended up in a tree or somewhere. So I wanted to write that first book. And that's what I did. So I got back in touch with that guy, and he did not want to introduce me to the Klan leader. He was fearful for my own safety and for his safety, because of taking a Black man to that person. When I reconnected with this guy, he was then out of the Klan. He was no longer involved. He'd gotten kicked out, and I found that out later. That's a pretty funny story. But anyway, I asked him to give me the Klan leader's robe and hood. I mean, I'm not robe and hood. Give me the Klan leader's address and phone number.
You eventually got the Robin Hood.
Yeah, I eventually got the Robin Hood, exactly. And he didn't want to do that. He was fearful. So he finally did it after 20 minutes of my begging and pleading, on the condition that I not tell the Klan leader, whose name at the time was Roger Kelly, that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I got his personal information. I agreed to it, and so he gave it to me. So long story short, I had my secretary contact Mr. Kelly, not tell him that I was Black, and ask him if he would sit down and do an interview with me, because her boss was writing a book on the Klan. Now, when the guy gave me the number and address from Mr. Kelly, he warned me. He said, "Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you." And I said, "Well, that's the whole reason I need to see him. Why would he kill me? He doesn't even know me. This is what I'm trying to understand, this mentality." He says, "I'm just warning you, don't fool with this guy." I said, this guy was genuinely concerned about my safety. I mean, he considered me a friend. So I said, I'll be careful. So anyway, so Mary, my secretary, who was white, and I only mentioned that because it plays into the story. I could care less what color anybody is. I had her call, because I figured if I called, Mr. Kelly might, hear in my voice that I'm Black and say, "I'm not talking to you," and then hang up the phone. And then my whole project would have ended right before we even got started, right? So I knew if Mary called him, he would know by her voice that the woman on the other end of the phone line is a white woman. And I know enough about the Klan mentality that he would not automatically assume that this white woman he's talking to is working for a Black man. Because, that just did not compute, especially a Black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they did not even exist. So I told her, do not tell Roger Kelly I'm Black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but don't give him reason to ask. If he agrees to do the interview, then obviously he can figure that out when he sees me. So she understood, and she talked to him. He agreed to do the interview. He didn't ask what color I was. So we set it up. We set it up for a time in a motel, and Mary and I got there super early. And I gave her some money to go down the hall and buy soda pop out of the vending machine, put it in the ice bucket, fill it with ice, and get it all cold, because I had no idea what Mr. Kelly was going to do when he arrived and saw me. But, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be hospitable and offer him a cold beverage, just like I would offer you if you came to visit me. So I had all that set. Now, this was not, but it was just pure coincidence that the room that we were in, you could not see who was in the room if you're standing in the doorway in the hall looking in, because there's a wall right there. You have to walk through the door, turn to your right, go around the corner, and then there's the room. So I took the lamp table and put it in the most obscure corner of the room, took the lamp off, and I had a little bag beside my chair, a little black canvas bag that contained a cassette recorder, some blank cassettes, and a copy of the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation, racial segregation. Now, I've read the Bible. I'm a Christian. I've never seen that in there. So I want to be able to reach down into my bag, pull out my Bible, and hand it to Mr. Kelly and say, "Please, Mr. Kelly, show me chapter and verse where it says Blacks and whites must be separate." So I'm all prepared. I set the cassette recorder in the middle of the table, hoping that Mr. Kelly would come in the room and give me the interview, despite the fact that I'm Black and that my, the former guy would had told me, he would kill me if I fooled with him. A, that he would come in the room, and B, that he would allow me to record the interview if he did come in the room. So I'm all prepared. Well, right on time, there's a knock on the door. Mary hops up and runs around the corner and opens the door. I'm seated back there at that table where you could not see me from the door. So she opens the door, in walks the bodyguard for the Klan leader. He's known as a Nighthawk. And he comes walking in, comes around the corner. He's wearing military camouflage with that red circle, white cross, blood drop patch on his chest on one side, the letters KKK on the other side, and embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster. He comes in, right? As soon as he turned the corner and saw me, he froze in his tracks. Now, Mr. Kelly was on the other side of the corner, still coming around. He did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. So when Mr. Kelly came around the corner, he slammed into the back of his bodyguard, knocking the bodyguard forward. And now they both were stumbling around, trying to regain their balance. And they're like looking all over the room. And I'm sitting there at the table, just, looking at their faces. And I could read their faces like a billboard sign on the highway. They were thinking, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Did we misunderstand something? Or is this an ambush? I saw that apprehension in their faces because they were expecting a white guy. So I stood up and I displayed both of my palms on my hands so they could see I had no weapons, nothing in my hands. And I walked forward towards them. I extended my right hand and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis." Well, he shook my hand. The Nighthawk shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, please, come on in. Have a seat, please, Mr. Kelly. So Mr. Kelly sat down opposite my chair at the little lamp table, and the bodyguard stood at attention to his right. And then I had to show him some ID and all this stuff. So I did that. And then we began, getting into our interview. And every time Mr. Kelly would make some biblical reference that I disagreed with, I would reach down to the leg of my chair where my bag was, put my hand in the bag, and pull out the Bible and hand it to him. Or if my cassette recorder ran out of cassette tape, it was full, I'd reach down into the bag and pull out a blank tape to insert into the recorder. Every time I would reach down into that bag, that Nighthawk would reach up to his gun and he would rest his hand on the butt of the gun. He never pulled it out of the holster. He just had his hand there at the ready. Okay. Now I understood that because that's his job. I am the enemy. I'm the black guy, right? He's the head of the Klan. So his job is to protect his boss, the head of the Klan. And he doesn't know what I have in that bag. There may be a weapon, maybe something. So he's prepared. So I understood that he's doing his job. So, that didn't bother me. Well, after about 45 minutes of, him reaching for his gun and me reaching into the bag and all that, he relaxed. And I began going in and out of the bag, and the bodyguard never moved. He realized there was no threat in the bag. So that was cool. Well, just maybe a little bit over an hour into our interview, Mr. Kelly and I just talking casually like you and I, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was a strange, very short, very fast noise. It sounded like, that was it. Just that short, just that fast. And we all jumped like, what was that? And I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table. I'll tell you why in a second. I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. I did not know what the noise was or why he made it. But because it was so short and so fast, it did not linger in my ear to give it time to figure out what it was. And so I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. When you're ignorant of something, you fear it. And I jumped up out of my chair, and I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. I didn't say anything to him, but my eyes were speaking to him directly. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" His eyes had focused right in on my eyes. He didn't say a word either. And his eyes were asking me, "What did I just do?" And the bodyguard had his hand back on his gun again, looking at back and forth between both of us, like, what did either one of you guys just do? And I had gone into survival mode. Because, when you fear for your life, that's where you go, into survival mode. And in survival mode, you will do anything and everything to preserve your well-being. And there are only about 4 things that you can do. Some people, they just, when they fear for their life, they pass out, they faint, they fall out on the floor, and they're out, they're unconscious. That's because the fear is so great that their brain cannot process it, and the brain just shuts down, short circuits, and they fall out from fear. Another thing people will do, their muscles will constrict, and they'll ball up and start shaking, and they can't move. People can be kicking them, punching them. They're not even trying to block the blows. That's called paralysis by fear. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody get into a fight and fall down and ball up into a fetal position. That's paralysis by fear. They ball up and they can't move. No matter how bad you're beating on them. The third thing people will do is to run away. That is indeed the best and most logical option. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from that fear. Leave the scene of that fear. Get out of there. All right? That was the option that I would have chosen had it been available, but it was not available. How am I going to outrun a bullet in a small motel room? Not possible. Okay? I was not armed. My secretary was not armed. The only person who I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk. I could see his gun. He had it in an open holster, open carry. And I did not know Mr. Kelly was wearing a dark blue suit and tie. I didn't know if he had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I knew was I was not armed, and I didn't want to die that day. So, and I got all these things running through my head, like, what did I just say to him? What did I just do to cause him to make some weird noise? And then I got the other Klansman, his voice in my head, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. So I got all that going on. So I was definitely in survival mode. And the fourth option was the one that I was about to execute, was to do a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. So when I flew up out of my chair and hit that table, I was ready to dive across that table, grab Mr. Kelly and grab the Nighthawk and slam them down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun. Because just like it's his job to protect himself and protect his boss, the Klan leader, it's my job to protect myself and protect my secretary. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was on my way when I hit that table. And Mary realized, she was sitting on the dresser because there were no more chairs in the room. She was sitting atop the dresser. She realized what had happened, and she began explaining it to us because it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket with the sodas had begun melting, and the cans of soda were shifting down the ice, falling down the ice. That was it. Somebody almost got shot over an ice cube. It may sound funny, but it really wasn't. It was horrifying in that moment. But we all began laughing when she explained it to us. And so I won't say that this was a learning moment at this particular juncture, but it was definitely a teaching moment, that would recur over and over again. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign, I want you to underscore, circle, highlight the word foreign entity, that being the bucket of ice cans of soda, of which we were ignorant. We knew about it, but we had long forgotten about it because we're so engrossed in conversation. So all because some foreign entity of which we were ignorant had entered into our comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful of each other. Ignorance breeds fear. If you don't, because we fear those things of which we're ignorant. If you don't keep that fear in check and address it, that fear in turn will escalate into hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't address and keep that hatred in check, that in turn will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because we're afraid of them. They scare us. But guess what? At the end of the day, they may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. We saw that whole progression almost come to completion. It stopped just short of the last component, destruction. Had the bodyguard put out his gun and shot me or my secretary, or had I pounced across the table and grabbed them and slammed them down to the ground, took them out, It stopped just short of that, which is a good thing. However, you and the rest of this country and the rest of the world saw exactly what I'm talking about on August 12th, 2017, in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia, where they had that large white supremacist rally. On that day, August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was a lot of hatred in Charlottesville. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction. When a white supremacist got inside his vehicle, drove it full force, into full speed, into the crowd of counter-protesters seeking to murder as many as he could. He succeeded in injuring just over 24 and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. Mm-hmm. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, how we go about addressing these issues, I have an issue with myself with how we do that. Okay, how we do it is top down. Top down works in certain situations, like for a corporation, like for a department, or something like that. Because if the management at the top level people, the executives and all that, the administration, if they are loose, then their subordinates down below will be loose. They take their cues from the top. It's like, say a police department. If the administration, the chief, and everybody up at the top level, the lieutenants and majors and all those people at the top, if they're loose, they don't really care about what's going on down below. Guess what? The cops on the beat down below, they're going to be loose. If it's tight upstairs, it's going to be tight downstairs, because what happens at the top trickles down. That is the way you solve those issues with departments and corporations. But in this kind of situation, that top-down thing doesn't really work so well. I mean, it can be applied, but it doesn't really work as well. It has to be a bottom-up, all right? So I say, forget about the destruction. Don't spend time addressing it. It's gone. What's been destroyed is not coming back. The destruction is merely a byproduct, a symptom of the root cause. Forget about the hatred. That also is a byproduct of the root cause, the nucleus. Forget about the fear, another symptom of the nucleus. If you can cure the nucleus, which is ignorance, if you cure ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there is nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. And that is where we need to focus our time, our efforts, and our money, our energy, in providing people with more exposure and more education to the things of which they are ignorant. That's why we go to school, right? So we can navigate society a lot better when we graduate. Well, we need to do this not only academically in school, but we need to do it outside as well. That exposure and that ignorance. In fact, I'm gonna share with you my favorite quote of all time. It's called the travel quote. And it's by Mark Twain, the great author. His real name was Samuel Clemens, right? Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. Anyway, Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." That is so true. And that travel exposure that I received as a kid, I think has a lot to do with, my personality and my perceptions of humanity today. Because I met people from all over the world. Now, today we have it, most Americans do not travel. That does not make them bad people. But according to the U.S. Census Bureau, most Americans don't even have passports. Only 37% of Americans have passports. Europeans, man, they're traveling all the time. They're constantly traveling, and therefore they're being exposed to many things. As a kid, we would be in these foreign countries. We'd go see different things. I touched the Berlin Wall. I've been atop the Eiffel Tower. I've been inside the pyramids in Egypt. I've been inside the Sphinx. I've put my foot in the Nile River in Egypt. Okay, I've been to a lot of these things. I stood 5 feet from the Mona Lisa in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Today, she's covered with a plexiglass kind of thing, so you can't even get anywhere near her, because a few years ago, somebody threw some liquid thing on the painting, But back then, you could walk right up to it. You couldn't reach out and touch it. You weren't supposed to, but you were right there. I saw all these things. And while I appreciated it at the time, I appreciated it a lot more when I would come back home here to the States. I'm in grade school, and we're studying world history. And we see all these things in our textbooks. I began realizing that most of the classmates seated around me, the closest they would ever come to those things that I saw in person were the pictures in the textbook. That does not make me a better person than anybody. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying it allows me a broader perspective. And, today, unlike me, I had to cross the Pacific Ocean, cross the Atlantic Ocean, which I've done numerous times, to go see things or be somewhere. Today, we have the internet. We didn't have that when I was a kid. You can travel virtually almost anywhere you want. Take the time to visit Germany, to visit Italy, to visit Nigeria, to visit Japan. Make some friends over the internet with people, and you're going to find you have more in common with those people than you realize, But we don't spend the time doing that. And that's why I'm saying if we cure the ignorance, all those other symptoms will go away.
Why don't you think that we spend the time traveling? Like, what's the root of that? Why aren't we traveling?
Well, the people that I talk to, they think that we are the greatest nation on the face of this earth. Everything that I want is right here. I don't need to go anywhere else. I don't need to see anybody else. That's very tunnel vision. I mean, of course, everybody wants to think, they're the greatest. I will say this. I have an issue with that statement. Perhaps we are the greatest nation on the face of this earth, technologically, all right? Because we, Americans, built the technology to put a man on the moon. Nobody else had done that. We did it. That's great. And while Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, was up there walking around on the moon, talking about one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, we were able to communicate with him live, back and forth, over satellite radio phone. We, Americans, invented that technology to talk all the way to the moon. You and everybody me and everybody I know has a cell phone and has internet, right? All we got to do is type a few words, type a few numbers. You're in Austin, Texas. You can talk to somebody right next door in Oklahoma. Or you can talk to somebody in California or New York. Or if you want to, you can type an email or type on your cell phone some numbers and call people in Africa or in China or in South America, wherever you want. We invented that technology. So how is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of this earth, but so many of us don't talk to the person who lives right next door because he or she is a different color, a different sexual persuasion, a different religion, or a different whatever. So it seems to me that before we can really brag about being the greatest nation on the face of this earth, maybe we need to bring our ideology up to the level of our technology, and then we can truly brag about us.
Daryl, thank you for sharing. It was your story straight through. I've heard it from the different TED Talks and reading the different articles, and it was beautiful just to be of witness in this experience with you. Now, it's interesting. I connected with you around this time where I think there's this boiling question inside of me, and it's been, I've been observing it over time because. For me, in my childhood, I grew up in a household. Also, I grew up in Maryland, So I know where a lot of your roots and where you're at currently.
Whereabouts in Maryland were you?
I grew up in Bowie.
Oh yeah, I used to date a lady over in Bowie.
Yeah, I think you told me that when we spoke on the phone. I went to Bowie High School, Prince George's County, and my parents, my parents were, they had I think a really beautiful relationship, or so it seemed, or I remember up until I was about 10. Although I did have my first death experience when I was 7. I had an uncle who was a police officer who committed suicide, and so I think that kind of kind of put me into this investigation mode to some extent of wait, what's happening in this world? Why would somebody take themselves out? And then in my teens, my parents started having challenging in their relationship. My dad is he likes his alcohol this lifetime, and they got married very young. My parents, they were each other's first, and so in my teens they started to disconnect from one another, and I would read my mother's journals and eavesdrop on phone calls to try to comprehend and understand what was happening. Because in my world, I played with dolls, they got married, they had families, and they lived happily ever after, and it was this beautiful world. And
Right.
so now of growing up and looking around, I'm like, why is there so much conflict and disconnection? Why are people depressed? And this kind of kicked off a little bit more inside of me. In previous episodes, I've been speaking a little bit about Stephen Boss, who is the famous dancer who recently passed away. And there is the narrative that the media has kind of come to the conclusion that it was a suicide. More for me from an outsider, I'm like, wait, he died 24 hours ago and it's deemed a suicide, and where is the investigation underneath the side? Because this seems very odd to me, because of the work that I do in the world, to observe this man. And the archetype of him is, you have a Black man who is super talented, an amazing dancer. And when you dance, endorphins are released, which make you happy. And he had a beautiful wife that you could just see in the videos of him, making eye contact with her, and they're just so in love. And, that's what it at least appears. And it does feel very authentic. Like I've seen, where it doesn't feel authentic, and this feels very authentic. And then young children. So my brain still I haven't been able to make sense of no. And then I see all the reels happening on Instagram of, him dancing and having a great time, saying this is the face of depression and suicide. And I'm like, what? This seems so odd and strange to me. I need to understand. And then also why, to me, I'm looking at it, why is the world so easily accepting of the suicide narrative? Why aren't we asking more questions? And so that's kind of that's where I'm looking around. And when you say, the why, and you talk about leadership and top down, I look around and I think how did we get here in the first place? Why is there a division mentality? And in my studying, I have, come across MK Ultra and mind control and programming and deep programming, and that a lot of hate, with trying to understand hate, passed down from generation to generation, and that it is creates fear. And it's interesting because you talk about when you go into fear, I think number 2, you said the way the body can respond is it goes into this you tense up and you tighten, you can't move.
Right, you're going to like a cocoon.
A cocoon. You're like a cocoon and stuck and stagnant. And I don't know, there was something that came across that thought is, as we're talking about travel and why aren't we traveling? I think that maybe, I'm just throwing out a query as I'm trying to understand, is that are a lot of Americans programmed? This is a question because as throwing out, potential reasons why are a lot of Americans cocooning in their own homes because they're fearful of leaving and connecting with others.
Yes, I think, Christina, you're spot on. And this has been going on a long time. not just in the last 2 years pandemic. This has been going on for a long time that Americans don't travel. Like, when we think of, okay, so you lived in Bowie, right? So people who live in Bowie or Silver Spring or, Potomac or wherever, Rockville, when they want to go on vacation, where do they go? Ocean City, 3 hours away, right? Lay out on the beach. Why not go to the Riviera? The French Riviera, and lay on the beach there. Why not go to the Copacabana beach in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro? We don't think that way. We don't go too far from home. All right. And that just seems to be an American mentality. I'm sure there are other places where they might have that, that xenophobia kind of thing going on. But like in Europe, those people, they go all over the place. When we take spring break up here in Maryland from high school, well, back when I was in high school, I'll put it that way. I don't know what kids are doing today. But where did we go? We went down to Fort Lauderdale, to the Keys in Florida. European kids, they go to a whole different country, But not today. I know that some schools have, where kids, go on some foreign exchange program or go to some other country, during spring break. They might go to France or might go, to Jamaica or somewhere, see something different that they can't see around their own country, which is a good thing because it definitely shapes your perspectives. Your perspective, one's perception is one's reality. And you cannot change somebody's reality, even if it's not real. If you try to tell them, no, that's not the way it happened. That's not the way it is. You're going to get pushback because they only know what they know. And to them, it's real because they perceived it. So their perception becomes their reality. If you want somebody's reality to change, what you have to do is never attack their reality, even though you may know it's wrong. Offer them a better perception or better perceptions, plural. And if they resonate with one of your perceptions, then they will change their own reality. Mm. So let me give you a hypothetical example. Let's say you have a 7 or 8-year-old brother, and he goes to a magic show with his buddies. And he comes home and tells you, Christina, you're not going to believe this. This magician on stage, he asked for a female volunteer out of the audience, and 50 women raised their hand. And he picked one out and brought her up on stage. He told her to climb into this long box and stick her feet out the hole at one end and stick her head out the hole at the other end. And then he closed the lid and he took a chainsaw and went right through the middle of the box. He cut her in half and he told her to wiggle her feet. And she wiggled her feet, and you're saying, listen, that didn't really happen like that. Yes, it did. I'm telling you, I saw it. I was there. You weren't even there. I saw it with my own eyes. You see, you've attacked his reality and he's going to push back on you. All right, because he knows what he saw. This man put a woman in the box. Her feet were on that side. Her head was at the opposite end. And he put a chainsaw right through the mud, through the middle. He cut her in half. And you're trying to tell him he didn't see that. You're going to get pushback. And to make it even more real to you, he tells you, and after he cut her in half and she wiggled her feet, he took the half of the box with the feet sticking out and moved it over to stage right and took the half of the head and moved it over to stage left. And then he went over there and he talked to the head of the woman and the head talked back to him. And then he brought the two halves back together and did some abracadabra incantation over the box. And then he opened the lid and she climbed out. He cut her in half and put her back together. And you're saying, listen, it's an illusion. No, it's not. I'm telling you, right? He's going to go off on you because there you go again, attacking his reality. It's not an illusion. I saw it. How can you tell me that? You weren't even there. If you saw it, you'd believe me, right? So people are going to defend their realities. So what you do is this: never attack somebody's reality. Offer them a better perception. So in this scenario, what you would say to your brother, say, listen, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But do you think that that perhaps it's possible that when he picked out one of those 50 women, he picked out a woman who actually works for him. He planted her in the audience and she travels with his show. She knows the trick and she sits in the same seat in every theater they go to all around the country. That way he can quickly spot her. He brings her up on stage, puts her in the box. And when she's in the box, there is a pair of dummy or mannequin legs laying on the floor of the box that are wearing the exact same stockings and shoes that she has on. So she simply brings her own knees up under her chest. So her whole body is on one half of the box. She picks up those mannequin legs and shoves them, just the feet, shoves them out that hole. So it looks like her feet are out that hole in those shoes. So her whole body is on the other half of the box. So when he goes through the box with the chainsaw, he doesn't even come anywhere close to her with that saw, right? And then when he tells her to wiggle her feet, she just shakes those legs with her hands. And then when he separates the two halves, obviously with the legs on that half, on that side of the stage, they can't move because she has to control them. So now they're just dummy legs over there. He has to draw your attention away from those legs because now they can't move. So he walks over to where the head is because her whole body is there. And he talks to her. And of course her head's going to talk back. Her whole body is over there. And then when he brings the two halves back together, she simply pulls those legs back into the hole, leaves them on the floor of the box, and then she climbs out. No blood, no nothing, right? And then your brother says, that might be the only way that could work. So you've given him a better perception, and he has resonated with it, and now he changes his own reality. That's how you cause change, not by canceling people out with cancel culture and telling them they're wrong and this is the real way, et cetera, et cetera. They may be wrong, and perhaps you do know the real way, but it's not going to work if you present it like that, because one's perception is one's reality. Whatever they perceive becomes their reality. So give them a better perception, and then they'll resonate with it and change their own reality.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. I actually personally didn't know how that magic trick happened.
I'm sorry I ruined it for you.
No, that is great because it opened up my mind as I see kind of this, what feels like some dark magic that is being presented over to the universe.
I will say this. I saw David Copperfield make an elephant disappear off stage. And that's real.
Okay,
let's did that one. And so until you can convince me it was an illusion, I'm going to say it's real.
Okay. That's we'll put a pin in that one and see if we can dive in and figure out how David Copperfield made the elephant disappear. So okay, so say so one of my things as I began to dive into this question of like, why is everyone so depressed? Like, what is the programming? Because it seems like it's a program, and now your story, I can kind of how the magic trick unfolds. It's almost, I can see when I scroll through my Facebook news feed, not necessarily where my friends feed, but my news feed, it appears to be an obituary nowadays, and so this seems as though there's this big overarching program from leadership in high places that are control and manipulation. And my apologies if I sound conspiracy theorist, but it's more of like me trying to like figure out why people are so depressed when I know I've seen the future. When I say I've seen the future, We Deepen, the organization that I operate, where we're aiming to shine light on the human connection industry. And I've essentially curated all of the brands and experiences that help people have more meaningful, loving relationships, bring them under one umbrella. We launched in 2018, 2019 in Los Angeles, and people were journeying through all these experiences. And I saw them, this is where I say I saw the future. I saw a future possibility because community was strong. You could walk into the grocery store in Venice, California, and you could say hi to people because you actually knew the people that lived in your neighborhood, and you were journeying through these experiences together, learning conflict resolution and communication and being in group meditations. And it was, community that was developing that wasn't confined to one particular location, one particular modality, one particular leader. It was essentially all of coming together. So I saw the future there and what's possible. And then to see, wow, well, this leadership, is there a leadership right now in the United States of America or worldwide? It's more seems very destructive and control and war and fighting. So
you are part of that leadership. You are part of that future leadership.
Well, then my question becomes to you is, as I, because essentially you could have looked at the Ku Klux Klan is the enemy. Like this
Yeah.
here is the enemy, and I'm befriending the enemy. And some of the bigger issues, that they say is underneath of all that is human trafficking and sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And how would somebody, first off, I've been nicknamed the human LinkedIn in the past. Like people have come to me like, Christina knows everybody in every industry and every place. However, I know nobody who works in human trafficking. But say,
let's hope not.
yeah, but say I did, but because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean,
yes.
There's the movie Traffic that starred Ashley Judd that was released in 2017. And in that film, they say that, and I don't know where they get the stats, who's calculating the stats of how much money human trafficking makes, but $100 billion they had made the year before, let's say it was 2016, which was combined more profitable than, Nike, Google, and Microsoft combined in that previous year.
Right.
So if I was sitting next to somebody who, like, where do we start those conversations? How would we even transition get somebody to disaffiliate with the idea of trafficking and harming other human beings?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And, it's possible, you may know some of these people, but of course, they're not advertising themselves. I've met people who were pedophiles. I've met people who were murderers and things like that. I don't know if I've ever met any human traffickers. I know people who work in that industry, fighting them and things like that. Let me think of some people, and I'll come up with some names of investigators and things like that who might be willing to talk to you. Mm-hmm. And you could pick their brains on that. Now, with human trafficking, as opposed to racism, there's a different component. There, you mentioned, $100 billion or whatever they made in a particular year. That's a lot of money, and where there's money, there are going to be people who are going to manipulate the system in order to get it. Just like when 9/11 happened, all of a sudden there were all these charities that most of these charities were fraud. They were pocketing the money, and the victims got nothing. The survivors, or their families got nothing. Same thing when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana. All of these different, charities popped up. People will go after anything that will bring them money. With racism, with the human trafficking, it's like these people are devoid of emotion. Whether they're sociopaths or whatever, the money speaks louder than their morality. Mm-hmm. I need a new house. I need to pay my bills. I want a Corvette or a Porsche car or whatever it is they want. That's why people go out and sell drugs. The money is there. Do they want their own kids on drugs? No, but they're willing to go out and stand on the street corner and sell an ounce of cocaine or whatever drug is. Fentanyl is now the big one, right? Because it brings in a lot of money and they can pay their bills. They can have all the things that they dreamed about when they were a kid. Some of these people don't have education. Some of them are highly educated. But they realize that, their dad, worked 30 years in his job before he retired, and he barely had any money in the bank. And all they have to do is go traffic one young girl, and they made more money in that one transaction, which maybe took a couple hours, than their father made all year. Or they go and sell an ounce of cocaine or whatever, and they got more money in that 10-minute transaction than their father makes in a year. So money is a great motivator. I'm not saying it's moral by any means, but people will give up their morals when it fills their bank account. There's a quote, I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, by the great American writer, Upton Sinclair. He said, I'm going to paraphrase, it's difficult for a man to understand something when his salary depends upon him not understanding it.
Wow.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say, you go and work for some corporation and your boss is corrupt as hell. But he's paying you, $500 an hour to do whatever it is you do at the corporation. You might be turning a blind eye because this money is helping you pay your mortgage, pay your rent, feed your kids, put them in college, even though you don't believe in what your boss is doing to be right. So it's difficult for a man to understand something when his salary depends upon him not understanding it. So that's what came to mind, when you said the $1 billion and stuff with the sex traffickers. That does not excuse them whatsoever. They need to be put under the jail forever. People who would do something like that to anybody, whether it's traffic an adult or traffic a child, it's wrong. And maybe $1 billion needs to be spent on getting technology and education and whatever to go after these people. But that's different than racism. People are not making money by being racist. They're expressing what they truly believe. So that has to be addressed in a whole different way. But I would try to find you some people who work in the human trafficking sector. And I know some. I just got to think about who they are.
Thank you. And I can see how, they're definitely totally separate. And also too, though, from, I almost look at the racism thing as if we can harmonize humanity, then collectively we get to come together. And I don't know if I want to use the word battle, but like almost our force of collective energy would transcend some of these bigger, darker issues in the world because we'd more easily find a sense of belonging together.
Absolutely. Let me show you this little short clip, and you will see Roger Kelly. You see me at a Klan rally that, he and I, began interviewing over and over again, even after that first meeting. And eventually he'd come down to my house. I'd go to his house. He would invite me to Klan rallies, et cetera. Here's just a little short from CNN.
Okay,
Listen to what he says about respect towards the end.
Davis is one of the few African Americans you will ever find attending a KKK rally. More than attending, he is welcome.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white niggers out there.
Has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
All right, man, the hell I'm back, because I believe in what he stands for and he believes in what I stand for. A lot of times we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. In Washington, I'm Carl Rochelle, CNN Sunday Morning.
Okay, so you hold on.
This is CNN.
Okay. So you heard Roger Kelly, who at that point was the imperial wizard, meaning national leader. The guy you first saw whispering in my ear, talking to me, was the Grand Dragon, which means state leader. When I first met Roger, he was the Grand Dragon, and then he moved up the ranks to imperial wizard, meaning national leader. And this guy, the guy you first saw me talking to, was the Grand Dragon. Today, I own both of their robes. You see it there. There's Roger Kelly's robe on the right there, the blue, and the Grand Dragon's robe with the green. And I've got tons of robes and hoods. Those are just two of them. But what you heard Roger Kelly say, he said, we may not agree on everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me, and I respect him to sit down and listen to him. Those were his words. He named three of those 5 core values I gave you that everybody wants. I said everybody wants to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to be heard, they want to be treated fairly, and they want the same thing for their family as anybody else wants for their family, right? Roger Kelly said, I respected him. That's one of those values. Now understand something. I did not respect what he had to say. I respected his right to say it, because I don't support racist beliefs. All right, but I will support somebody's right to express their belief or share their opinion. So he said, I respected him. He said that I sat down and listened to him. That means I allowed him to be heard. That's value number 2. And then because I respected him and sat down and listened to him, he said he respected me and sat down and listened to me. That's treating each other fairly. So you got respect, allowing somebody to be heard, and treating people fairly. He named 3 of those values in that one sentence. And that is how his robe came into my possession. Because over time, he began thinking I was applying those 5 values. And it broke through.
You know, it's almost you gave him a sense of belonging within another identity.
I offered him a better perception. I didn't try to change his reality. No, give me that robe. You're wrong. The Klan does nothing but murder Black people and hang them from trees. And you need to get out of that thing. Give me that robe. That's not going to work. That's not going to work at all.
Yeah. And also because people want to belong. They want to belong to something.
Right.
So he found his belonging in the KKK. But once he saw there was a different alternative and a different perception, as you switched his perception, he could see another possibility, and uniting the humanity together in one cohesive sense of belonging. I don't know how that's necessarily possible, because 150 people, they say, is is as much as the human brain can withstand. But some ways to keep uniting us that's not based on any type of hate or any type of religion that just locks us in a specific box, but more of a whole holistic, we're all on this human thing called Earth together.
And he and others as well. I mean, some of the people who've left, out of those 200 people, some of them are leaders and some of them are just members. I have to admire the leaders a lot more, because they are leaders. They're at the top, and leaders have followers. There are people who follow him. That's his membership, who look up to him. He's the Grand Dragon. He's the Imperial Wizard. And you have all these members who follow you, right? How do you then go to your membership and tell them, listen, folks, you all need to get out of this. I was wrong. I'm leaving. How do you tell somebody that you've led that you were wrong? Can you see Donald Trump telling all his followers, hey, folks, I really screwed up. I was wrong about everything. Not going to happen, right? So, it's ego comes into it as well. So, I got to commend Roger Kelly, for saying, he didn't just retire and hand down his organization to the second in charge. He dissolved it. He was done with it. And he told them I was wrong. And he apologized to me for even being in the organization. So, that means a lot.
That you remind me too, there's also a man, Rob Bell. There's a documentary on him.
What was his name?
Rob Bell. He was a leader of a church, a pastor of a church in Michigan, and he ended up disaffiliating from the church and began traveling around the country and speaking, but more from a more of saying hey, religion confines us in some ways, and it's much bigger than that. And it's a great doc. I'll send you the link.
Please do. I'd love to see that.
I do understand we're short on time, and you have somewhere to be in about 4 minutes to leave.
Yeah, I got to leave in about 4 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. One last quick question. Why don't you drink alcohol?
Growing up, my parents, we had a bar in our house that would rival anybody's bar that you could name. Okay, my parents were always entertaining, as what diplomats do, cocktail parties, all this kind of stuff. And so both my parents drank socially. I don't have anything against it. It's not like it's some religion that I don't drink. No, we always had it in the house. And as a kid, I see people come to our house to these cocktail parties, or sometimes I would accompany my parents to other people's homes, when they were having cocktail parties, and I'd play with their kids or whatever. I'd see people coming to my house straight, and then a couple of hours later they were leaving sideways, and I'm like, wow. And I'm somebody. I'm not a control freak when it comes to other people. Like if you and I were in a relationship or whatever, I wouldn't be trying to control you. No, not at all. But I am a control freak when it comes to me. I want to be in control of what I do. I don't want to be walking out sideways and all this kind of stuff. I've never done drugs. I've never drank. And believe it or not, I've never smoked, not pot or a cigarette. I've never had a lit cigarette in my mouth. And I'm 64 years old. My dad smoked. I mean, he quit, long before he died, but he smoked. Both my parents drank, socially. They didn't do any drugs, anything like that. But I've never done that. I've been around it. I'm a musician, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, all that stuff. I never got involved in drugs or drinking. It's, because I want to be in control. Now, where I fall short, I'm not perfect, but where I fall short, I love sweets, and they're not good for me. So maybe you can help me with that.
Okay, for sure. I definitely count on part of the biohacking community.
Okay.
I'm going to go spend the day with Dave Asprey in a moment, who's like the king of biohacking. Daryl, thank you so much for this conversation. You are so special. I'm so honored to know you. I now feel there's this kinship, this friendship between us. So I'm even blessed and honored to call you a friend.
Absolutely. Well, let's call this part 1, and we'll do another part 2 sometime.
Yes, I was going to ask the same thing. Thank you, for sure. And everybody, thank you for tuning into another episode of Deepen with Christina. Again, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, rate it, share it with a friend. It helps more people find it and helps me continue to do it. And until next time, enjoy. Bye.
Thank you.